and happy Sunday evening, February 27, 2022. I'm Riley King. Welcome to this Sunday evening edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. We have a lot of news to get to this Sunday evening, so let's get started right now. First up, the battle for Ukraine. Russia efforts to take the capital continues. Let's take a listen to that video from NBC News.
Real cowboys get customized car insurance with Liberty Mutual, so we only pay for what we need.
Hey, Tex, did someone else get a turn?
Yeah, hang on, I'm about to break my own record. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
With fighting raging, Ukraine's president this morning rejecting Russia's offer for talks in Belarus. He said the neighboring country is complicit in Russia's invasion, but is open to meeting elsewhere. And overnight, a battle in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Ukrainian officials say Russian forces blew up a gas pipeline there, igniting a massive fire. While near the capital, Kyiv, flames coming from an oil depot. Ukrainians say it was attacked by the Russians near an area of intense fighting. In Moscow, President Vladimir Putin making his first televised remarks since Friday, pushing more propaganda, calling the invasion a special operation to assist the Ukrainian separatist regions. Back in Kyiv, now under around-the-clock curfew, the Russian push to take the city continues. This building destroyed by a missile just yesterday, but Ukrainians, including their citizens, are fighting back, some building Molotov cocktails, others removing road signs hoping to confuse advancing Russian troops. This as so many families try to flee the violence. Kyiv's train station, a center of the exodus. At border crossings, some trying to push through gates as hundreds of thousands have left and many more still wait. Around the world, from the U.S. to Georgia to South Korea to Israel, protesters uniting in demonstrating against Russia's invasion. Death to Putin even heard in Iran, a country closely aligned with Russia. And overnight, the U.S. alongside the EU, UK, and Canada agreed to remove selected Russian banks from the financial service system known as SWIFT, effectively blocking its access to global transactions. The leaders saying in a joint statement, we will hold Russia to account and collectively ensure that this war is a strategic failure for Putin. As for Ukrainian leader President Volodymyr Zelensky, he has quickly become a wartime leader. He is defiant in his frequent selfie videos, insisting his country wants to talk peace, but is ready to fight. And Willie, in an unusual move, but one that speaks to the severity and the situation here in this country, Ukraine has not only asked its civilians to fight the Russians, this morning they're also asking foreign fighters all over the world to come to Ukraine to take on Vladimir Putin. They're saying to look at the Ukrainian missions in their respective countries to find out how to sign up and come here to face the Russians head on. Willie?
Extraordinary. Tom Yamas in Lviv, Ukraine for us this morning. Tom, thanks so much.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Trump praises Putin after condemning invasion of Ukraine. Let's take a listen to that video from NBC News.
The storm, it's starting.
Without you, our whole world crumbles into dust.
This won't come between us.
Former President Donald Trump spoke at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando last night. He condemned the invasion of Ukraine, but repeated his praise for Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The problem is not that Putin is smart, which of course he's smart, but the real problem is that our leaders are dumb.
Trump also spoke in support of Ukrainian President Zelensky, calling him a great man and saying he is praying for the people of Ukraine.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Chuck Todd, Biden should focus on the fight for democracy around the world. Let's take a listen to that video from NBC News.
Chuck Todd is NBC's political director and moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, good morning. So meanwhile, President Biden's got his State of the Union address coming up on Tuesday night, the first of his presidency, of course. And where do you begin? In the middle of a war in Ukraine, still dealing with a pandemic, with a new Supreme Court nominee out there. What is that speech going to look like for the president?
It's a great question, Willie, because, you could make an argument that he'd be better off giving an Oval Office address on Ukraine and Russia and everything that's about that and say, I'm going to do a State of the Union in a month or two, but right now we've got to deal with this tyrant. And this is the single most important thing in the world. So, look, they're not going to do that. The State of the Union is obviously, and 6 weeks ago they saw it as an opportunity to try to reset the presidency. If they try to go into the State of the Union saying, hey, we're gonna prove to people we feel their pain on the economy and inflation and all this stuff, I think they're grasping there if they think that this speech can take care of that. I think they're better off focusing on what everybody's focused on right now around the world, and that is what's happening in Ukraine, what can be done, what the U.S. needs to do. Maybe he wraps it in sort of the fight for freedom and democracy around the world. He can connect that back to the United States. But look, I think it's a huge challenge for him. But if they sit here and they say, oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and let me tell you about this and Build Back Better, I think it's going to fall on deaf ears. So it's a time for him to be leader of the free world. That's what Tuesday night needs to be.
It's interesting to watch Republicans. It's almost been a unifying moment, this war in Ukraine. Most of them, anyway, speaking out against Vladimir Putin. Chuck Todd, thank you so much. As always, we, of course, will look for more this morning on Meet the Press when Chuck is joined by U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield. And NBC News will have complete coverage of President Biden's State of the Union address to Congress on Tuesday night.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Ukraine President, I don't need a ride. I need more ammunition. Let's take a listen to that video from NBC News.
I'm so glad we did this. I'm so glad we did this. I'm so glad we did this.
Life is for living. Let's partner for all of it.
I'm so glad we did this.
Edward Jones.
President Zelensky, who I agree is emerging as an enormous example in leadership, was told the other day by a variety of people, hey, you better get out of Kyiv. You better get to Lviv in the west. What did he do? He took off his suits, put on his hunting gear, and said, I don't need a ride. I need more ammunition. That's the kind of leader you want to see, and we need to provide him the ammunition. Really, the other thing is continue to move U.S. troops to the borders of NATO, not into Ukraine, but we need to show Putin that this alliance stands together. And that means, as I think the president has done correctly, get U.S. troops to Europe for reassurance. They are standing alongside the Brits, the French, the Germans, all along these borders. Last thing, not a U.S. thing, Willie, but I was very pleased to see just a couple hours ago, the Chancellor of Germany announced the biggest defense spending increase in recent German history. They're going to be spending over 2% of their GDP on defense, something we've asked them to do for a couple of decades. These are all unintended bad consequences for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, Germany coming along now. Admiral, before I let you go, you touched on President Zelensky. Just want to ask you, though, as someone who has led troops into battle as the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and elsewhere, what does it mean to troops to see a leader like President Zelensky in battle fatigue, sitting with the troops, drinking coffee with them, standing in the streets effectively and not going into hiding?
Yeah, he is example in leadership 101. Be out front, and where you can't be physically, get your videos out there. Put on the same combat gear that your troops are wearing. Stand up for your nation. And let's face it, he's someone who's been a performer in a previous life. He's pretty good with a one-liner. He said the other day, when the Russians come for us, they will see our faces, not our backs, meaning they are not going to back down. He's the kind of leader I would want to go into combat with.
Admiral Stavridis, so great to have your insights always. We appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. How far is Putin willing to go in Ukraine? Let's take a listen to that video from NBC News.
This week, Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the 145 million people of his country in a long, grievance-soaked speech that offered his justification for the invasion of Ukraine. The former KGB officer long has lamented the collapse of the Soviet Union and dreamed of piecing it back together. In that address, Putin said, quote, "Ukraine is an inalienable part of our own history, culture, and spiritual space. These are our comrades." So how far is Putin willing to go in pursuit of his geopolitical fantasy? And has he miscalculated badly this time? NBC senior international correspondent Keir Simmons puts those questions to a spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry in our Sunday Focus.
Every war President Putin has fought, from Georgia to Syria to Crimea, has been a calculated risk. And every time he has emerged almost unscathed. But is it different this time? This morning, President Putin is facing a battle on multiple fronts. Militarily in Ukraine, domestically facing protests once unimaginable, and internationally from a horrified world. It's too early to say whether he has made a catastrophic misjudgment, though opposition leaders are already questioning President Putin's reasoning.
Some Russians are saying that Putin is today more isolated than Stalin was toward the end of his life. We know that President Putin has been very much in quarantine and holed up in his residence since the COVID epidemic began. I think this is not a system where he's going to be told things that contradict his worldview.
That worldview laid out in a rambling address launching his latest war in Ukraine. He accused the Ukrainian government of killing Russians. It's a view repeated by his officials, like his foreign ministry spokeswoman, who we sat down with this week for the first Western interview with a Russian official since the fighting began.
Our ambition is to put an end to this bloodshed.
You've begun a conflict to try and end the bloodshed. People are dying, and your aim is to try and end the bloodshed.
People are really dying there. People are perishing, and we need to do our utmost to put an end to this bloodshed.
Repeatedly this week, President Putin pleaded with the Ukrainian people not to fight back and to rise up against their government. If this is an insight into his battle plan, then it's not going well.
What is the plan? And most importantly, perhaps, because it's not going to be an occupation, you say, what's the exit strategy?
So you want me to take out the secret plan and say, just look, this is a secret plan, and I'm telling you this exclusively.
There are commentators in the West who are saying that this is going to be catastrophe for Russia, that this is going to be a new Afghanistan.
There was so-called Afghanistan in Syria. There was so-called Afghanistan in Kazakhstan. We have heard it on many occasions, and I have never seen that Western forecasts or predictions would come to fruition.
The risk now that this famously risk-averse leader, who says he has no choice but to go to war, will feel he has no option but to unleash even more barbaric violence.
If there are people around him who could dissuade him from doing it, we don't know who they are.
And Keir joins me now live from Moscow. Keir, good morning. That was some extraordinary logic from the spokeswoman there. We want to stop the bloodshed that we started. Meanwhile, we've seen these remarkable images, as you say, of the protests in the streets of Russia, with citizens there risking arrest and perhaps worse to speak out. So does Putin care about any of that? Does he even notice his own people in the streets?
Oh, I think he very much does care. And Willie, you know, I think we are seeing domestically chinks in his armor, albeit that these are early days. Not just those protests with now more than 3,000 people arrested, not just the lines we're seeing at ATMs, but also the petitions. Hundreds of journalists in Russia signing petitions. Even the director of the Bolshoi Ballet signing a petition, and a lawmaker who voted for President Putin's action just this week, now saying, I didn't vote for the bombing of Kyiv. We're even, Willie, seeing the children of oligarchs and Kremlin officials speaking out on social media. I think it's notable, Willie, to look at President Putin's speech just this morning, in which he talks about praising the military for special operation to provide assistance to the people of Donbass. In that address, he did not mention the assault on Kyiv. I think that suggests deep unease in the Kremlin about how it's playing out, and it just raises that question again. Are the Russians not only being less than honest with the world, less than honest with their own people, but are Russian officials being less than honest with President Putin himself, Willie?
Yeah, and as you say in the piece, those protests were unimaginable in Russia even just a few months ago. Keir Simmons in Moscow, thanks so much, Keir. We appreciate it.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And we are going to switch gears now, and let's go into weather. Weather this evening in Boston, 15 degrees. New York City, 24 degrees. Washington, D.C., 32 degrees. Atlanta, 40 degrees. Jacksonville, Florida, 58 degrees. Tampa Bay, Florida, 62 degrees. And Miami, Florida, 66 degrees. In Dallas, 30 degrees. Phoenix, 52 degrees. Las Vegas, 42 degrees. Los Angeles, 48 degrees. And San Francisco, 44 degrees. That is a look at the weather across the United States for this evening. And thank you for watching this evening edition of the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night and goodbye.